Have you ever wondered how big the Poppy Playtime factory really is? What are all those terrifying places hidden within it? Because let's be honest, this place was supposed to be a toy paradise, yet it turned into hell on earth. When we think of toy factories, we imagine fun and games, right? But what about 35 floors underground, a prison, a daycare hidden inside a cave? This sounds more like Area 51 than a place for making toys. So today we're diving into the mysterious question, how big is the Poppy Playtime factory? And more importantly, what the hell were they doing in these places? Right from the start, it's clear that Playtime Co isn't just some ordinary workshop. Giant chimneys, a massive courtyard, and a main entrance that looks more like an airport than a toy factory. And here's something strange. It's completely surrounded by a dense forest. Why build a toy factory in the middle of nowhere? The answer is simple. When you're doing weird and bizarre stuff, the last thing you want is a Starbucks right next door watching you. Even from the outside, the place looks like it has entire sections that we'll probably never get to explore in the game. Inside, everything starts off somewhat normal. A cafeteria, a theater, a power room, and a toy testing area. And of course, we know that the room where we create the plushie is called the Innovation Room. So far, everything seems fine. It gives the impression that this was just a factory designed to bring joy through its toys. But then we start discovering some of the more questionable areas of the factory, like these stairs that literally lead straight to hell. When we pass the stairs to hell, great name by the way, we enter what seems like a whole new level of the factory. But this isn't just a basement, it's an underground complex. If you take a left, you'll find a storage room. At this point, we're still technically on the first floor, since we can still see the sky. But the moment we crawl through that vent, that's when we start descending. And that's how we end up in the famous Make a Friend room, where toys were assembled. This is when we start to realize just how deep this factory actually goes. The conveyor belts moving toys stretch so far down that we can't even see the bottom. But we won't be left wondering how deep it really is. So, to calculate this depth, we're gonna make an estimate based on the game structures, comparisons with real-world locations, and some logical calculations. There are toy storage warehouses here, shipping toys to who knows where. And of course, everything is underground, ensuring that no one can escape. At this point, it's clear that the factory isn't just on the surface. Even in the latest chapter, we saw that the elevator Poppy used to go up came from a ridiculous depth. But things get really weird when you keep going deeper and deeper, and you just keep descending. That's when we come across the room where Poppy was locked up, beyond the giant hallway of poppies. We also find an office belonging to Elliot Ludwig. And here's the real question. Why was all of these buried underground? Were they trying to dig all the way to the Earth's core? These areas are found at a depth of approximately 100 feet. And just so you don't think I'm exaggerating, this place practically functions like an underground city, complete with its own trains for transportation. When we reach the hole where Mommy Longlegs kidnaps Poppy, if we slide down, we end up at the game station entrance. And this play area? It's buried absurdly deep. Why would you put a place for kids to play 170 feet below underground? Was it so no one could hear them scream? The calculation is simple, friends. A freight elevator in a large factory can go down between 170 and 230 feet, so we'll use that as a baseline. That means we estimate the game station to be approximately 230 feet below the main factory. Even in this play section, there are other storage rooms full of discarded toys. There's musical memory, Whack-A-Huggy, the statues, and more. And if you thought things couldn't get any weirder, oh, they absolutely do. Because the deeper we go, the less logical these places become. After Poppy diverts our train, sending us even further down, we find the daycare. And what kind of daycare is this? These poor kids didn't even get to see the sunlight. Literally, because this so-called daycare was inside a cave. These kids weren't being taken care of, they were being locked up like bats. Playcare seems to be a deeper level than Game Station, since it doesn't appear to be accessible from the earlier sections. In construction, when a facility has a special area like a shelter or a hidden lab, it's usually 65 to 100 feet below the accessible area. So, if Game Station is at 230 feet, we can assume Playcare is at least 100 feet lower, giving us a total depth of 330 feet. The plumbing and water lines must have been extremely long to reach these places. And in Chapter 3, we discover even worse things. After the train crash, Ollie tells us to head towards the daycare, and here's where we find a cable car. Excuse me? While riding it, we get a clear view of this terrifying daycare, buried deep underground. We also find places like the house, the school, because sure, let's educate kids in total darkness. A fun house? At this point, I don't even want to know what kind of fun they meant. And a massive office. If we enter the house, it's huge, practically a mansion inside the factory, and the same goes for the school. And finally, when we enter the fun house, we see Catnap, literally praying, because apparently the only fun thing in this place was demonic rituals. Playtime Co had everything: a theater, a train, a cable car, a pool. Oh, and in case that wasn't suspicious enough, a prison. Who the hell were they locking up here? Employees who knew too much? Failed experiments? People who ate the boss's lunch? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. After we fight Catnap and defeat him, we go even deeper with Poppy on an elevator that seems endless. And that's exactly where Chapter 4 begins. We pass through caves, just throw in a mining operation at this point, and eventually reach what looks like a toy graveyard. And if you weren't convinced that Playtime Co was a literal underground city, after crossing through this junkyard, this time to Playtime's prison. If we put all of this together, the structure of Playtime Co looks something like this. When we reach the refuge, we move through a tunnel that leads to the sewers, meaning at this point we're more than 574 feet underground, even deeper than the Washington Monument. But after our chase with Doey, we take an elevator even further down, arriving at a spot where we find trucks. How the hell did these trucks even get down here? They must have needed to refuel twice just to make the trip. And this is when we finally meet with Poppy and Kissy Missy, right before we fall into the factory's deepest and scariest area, the Playtime Co laboratories. This is a whopping 790 feet underground. That's deeper than the Golden Gate Bridge, if it were buried. This is where the most twisted experiments happened. This is where they created monsters like Huggy Wuggy and Mommy Long Legs. Why build all of this underground? Because it's hard to shut down a factory when no one even knows it exists. When you put it all together, Playtime Co wasn't just a toy factory. It was a lab, a test facility, a prison, and an underground city. And the real question is, was it really abandoned? Or is something still down there? Because seriously, how is there still electricity if nobody's been there for years? Think about that the next time you see a plush toy with an unnervingly big smile. Because who knows, maybe Playtime Co never really shut down. And you might be their next toy. This has been just an analysis of the main Poppy Playtime game. Would you like to see how big it is, including the other sections from Project Playtime? Don't forget to leave your comments.